So this morning we're going to implement the follower. I don't know if anybody actually did that, but we'll do it together. So what I did is I copied Twitter clone to day 3 of week 3. That way we'll have the old version around. And I wrote down with just a to-do list of things that I needed to do. And so the first of those things was to add the button. So that should be pretty easy. So the idea is that on the user profile page, this is the user's timeline. This is this is, you know, you go to / whatever their username is. I have an example here is /example, and it would take them to this page. And so what we want to do is add up here in this nav section a follow button. So actually, I'll make it a button. I'm gonna give it a class instead of an ID. And the reason I'm going to do that is normally I give it an ID, and then in my JavaScript I go get it and attach an event listener. I think what I want to do is there may be more than one follow button on my page. So I'll give a class a follow button, and then I'll look for all of them, and then attach a listener to all of them, right? And that way I could have more than one follow button. But for now, there'll just be one, but I just wanted to do it that way. And then I tend to, so we could, you know, there's this notion of who am I going to follow, and it's whoever profile I'm looking at right now. And so I think a useful way to do this is, instead of like getting that out of a URL or something, is I'll add an attribute here, and I'll say data dash username equal dot profile dot username. And then in my event listener, I can get it out of the target. I can say event the target's a good attribute and give it this thing, and I can get the username that way. And then I can know who I'm following, okay? Rather than doing something from the URL or something like that. Everybody following? I just made a button. And if I fix whatever's wrong with this, line 91.
What was the attribute that you put
I made one up. Data dash username.
Okay.
So convention in HTML5 or whatever is that you make up a attribute, it's not a real attribute, prefix it with data dash.
Okay. Cool.
What does it not like about my button? Because it's not in a form or something? Did I save that other file? I'm in the wrong folder. That's probably what it is. There we go. So I made this button. So now it doesn't do anything because we haven't hooked it up. So let's hook it up with JavaScript. And so, what am I going to write here? Follow button.
Document dot query select and then dot your class name.
So, make sure that gives me what I expect. Cool, I got a button. So I can say so I'm going to do prevent default, even though it doesn't actually matter. I just, as a generally speaking, for buttons, links, and stuff, do that so that if you put href equal pound, that will prevent it from actually changing the URL to pound. So,
I need to add that to my code.
yeah, always prevent the default action, especially for forms and things. Okay, so we have our button. What are we going to do in here? I think we're going to make an XML HTTP request, right? And I'm going to post to /API/ what's called follow the data I'm going to send is just the username. So instead of that, I'm going to send the username. So I need to get the username. And I'll just say event.target.getAttribute data-username. So there I have that. I put it in the data that I send to the server. And then, not sure what I want to do on success. But reload sounds fine, so I'll just do that. But maybe we'll do something else. But for now, this should be the next step, I think. So if I refresh, click follow, I get a 404. That's expected because I haven't implemented it yet. But see, it is posting to this URL. So the next step is, so I added it to my template. I then added code to handle the event in JavaScript. And now I'm going to add code on the server to handle the follow. Okay, everybody following? It's pretty straightforward process. And then, so in here, I'm going to add, I have to handle API. You notice how it's handling every API? And if we look in there, it has, it's splitting on the first, for the bit here, the slash at the end. So right now it just has tweets, so I need to add a follow. Just to show that this is working. Now when I click follow, I get back, oh, because I have the reload in there. You couldn't see it. So a tip for that kind of, when you have that problem, you can add breakpoints in JavaScript. So now I've inserted a breakpoint on my reload, so it doesn't reload. When it gets there, it'll stop. So I click it and see how it stopped. Paused in debugger, and it stopped here. And that's so I can see what I posted. So I got back true, because that's what I sent here. So it is getting here, that's all I'm saying. So now I'm going to follow. So I know that's correct. So now I have to implement the follow. I think the way I might want to do this is I'll probably make a follow in my data go. I'll probably make a function there that will do the following. So I'll probably call it follow, or follow user, maybe that. And it'll probably take a context. And then the first thing will be the follower, and the second thing will be the followee. So the one who wants to follow and the one they're going to follow. So maybe yeah. If we were clever, we might call it the disciple and the leader, or something like that. Okay, so we need to get usernames. I have the current user. How do I get his username?
You have a function get username by email.
So I have a get profile.
Profile.
If there's an error, this really shouldn't happen, but because you're not supposed to be able to click the button. But if it did, I'm just going to show it to them. Like, I don't think the button would be there if they didn't have a profile. I guess it would be. So we probably would want to hide the button, but for now, we'll just send it as an error.
Or you can redirect to sign up.
You can't redirect in an AJAX call. Okay? If I redirect in here, it causes the AJAX call to redirect, which causes this one right here to redirect, not the page. So it would cause this to redirect, and then my AJAX handler would have to handle that. It wouldn't cause the outer page to redirect.
Okay.
So you can't use a redirect inside of an AJAX call. It won't help you. And so, okay, so we have, we get the profile. So now I have the profile username. And then I have to get the user that I'm trying to follow, right? And so I can get that. Where do I get that from?
From your, what you sent in with your AJAX.
Exactly. So we can can say new decoder rec.yd.decode ampersand username. This error can happen if they don't pass in a string. So we do need to handle that too. Because you can never trust users to send the right data. So this is get username to follow, get profile of current user. So we send that here. That probably we're going to make it return an error, and we'll just do the same bit of error handling. I'm not sure what an error would mean. Maybe it doesn't have access to data store or something, but pretty much that shouldn't happen. And then I actually think this is fine at the end. So the result of doing a follow, we'll just say true, because you shouldn't get anything back. You're just sort of you're saying I want to follow this person. I don't expect that to return any data. I just expect it to have caused something to happen inside the system. So now I'm following. Right. So I'm just going to return true. Send back to the client.
You need to return anything?
No, well, you should send something back because otherwise the request.
Well, eventually we can close and stuff, but
It's better to have some response than none. Right. Okay, so we have to implement follow user. So the step on the server was we added a route. I added a route, I didn't have to do anything because this one is already accepting anything in API. So all I had to do is add to my switch a case for follow. So I added a route, so it would go to the follow route. And then I had to go step by step through what I thought was going to happen on the server. The first thing I wanted to do was get the username from the user. Then I wanted to get the profile of the current user. And then I want to call this function, which I haven't written yet, to make it so that they get followed. Okay, so that was the basic thinking. I'm sort of taking it one step at a time. And now I think, okay, the server part is good. I just have to make the data part work. Okay, so I've done the plumbing for the HTTP API stuff, but now I need to actually make it do what it's supposed to. So I need to write this function. So I'm going to go to my data go, and at the bottom here, I'll add a follow user function. Context is a context. Then we have these two. And then it's going to return an error. So I think that's what I had on the other side. Now I'm to define it here. Okay. So how do we want to do this? I think one way we can do this is we can add this following to the profile. And the idea here is that we'll have a list of strings, and each of the things inside this list is a username. So if this is the account test, and he's following the account example, inside of here will be example. Follow?
Can you also do it with an ancestor query? That
what are you thinking there?
so like for each user, you know, so here's the user, just like we did with tweets, user, and then kind of the child of the tweets. You could have user, and then you could just have a list of like followees for each, you know, the person would be the follower, and so each time you just add an entry to their list, and then you could do an ancestor query for that user and pull out all the people they're following. I don't know.
You could have ancestors between profiles, but you can follow more than one person. So ancestors are one-to-one or one-to-many relationship of. Unlike people, we have two direct ancestors, parents. But in our tree, we have one. You can't have two. So, like, I have a bunch of tweets. Each of those tweets can have one person who caused the tweet to happen. They can't have two, right? They only have one ancestor. Now that ancestor can have ancestors too, but what I'm saying is there can only be one link there. But you can have lots of followers, and those followers can follow other people. Okay, and so it's like a mini to mini. So we can't really represent it that way. What we could do is we could make a separate type. I don't know what you would call this.
Follower list.
A follow. I don't know what a follow is, but and then you could have follower, followee, string, and so it'd have those two properties, and then you can use an ancestor for that. But you could store a struct for all the relationships, right? And this would just have those two things in it and a huge list of them. You could do that. And then you could make the ancestor either be you could make the ancestor be the followee or the follower. Not both, but one or the other. You could do the ancestor that way.
Why can't you just have another, in the profile of followee, another array like that, like the following? Wouldn't this be wrong?
Oh, you mean this way?
Yeah, just like that.
That's fine. That's certainly one way. We could also do it the other direction.
I mean, can't you have both in there? An
Uh,
array of followers and an array of followees?
Because you have to update both every time anything changes.
yeah, that's where it gets complicated. So say I follow somebody, that means I update my list of who I'm following, but then I also have to update their list of who's following them.
Right.
And so now I'm updating everything twice, and that can be, it's certainly possible, but the likelihood of me making a mistake and forgetting to update one and not the other, that can happen. So now we have a synchronization problem of I have to make sure I always do all of the right things every time. And so in general, but we're going to discuss this once I implement it, but it's a good idea to try to only store data in one place when you can, because otherwise you end up with a synchronization problem.
You want your database to be dry too, not just your code.
Yeah.
Don't repeat yourself.
What's that?
You want your database to be dry too, not just your code. Don't repeat yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, you want data to live in one place. It's like, for example, the U.S. government supposedly has your data in its databases in probably 10 or a dozen databases rather than in one. And what that causes is that your address is wrong in one, or it causes lots of headaches, right, when the data's not the same. So the duplication of the data causes synchronization problems, and then sometimes pieces of it are out of date. And so to build a system properly, you have to make sure that every time you update the data, you update it everywhere it lives. And that's what is easy to make a mistake and forget one place and break it. So there are lots of ways we could do this, and we'll discuss it more in a sec. We'll just do this one for now, the following. And so the reasoning here is I would rather store who I'm following than who's following me, because it's likely there are users who have lots of followers. But there's less users who are following a ton of people. Usually, most people are following a few people, but some people have tons of followers. So this way I'm storing only the people who are following. That's probably going to work better in general. But we'll see. So I just need to add it to this list, is all I have to do. So to follow a user, I have to get their profile. So I have to get the profile of the follower. So I got the profile, and then I have to add to the list the followee, the person I'm following, and then I have to save the profile, which I think I have create profile. I'll rename that to save, because now it's also updating, and I'll just return it. Okay, so I give the profile, I add it to the list, and then I save. Does that make sense? So that's pretty simple. There's one change I want to make to this. Anybody guess what that is? What if I click follow on the same person?
You're going to get them in there a couple times.
Yeah, they'll be in there twice. So the first thing I should do is loop through If I'm already following this person, we'll just return nil. Follow we. But otherwise, that should be good, I think. Does that make sense?
Ideally, though, that would be like, I mean, that's a good check, but ideally, you'd see following button or unfollow if you're already following somebody.
Yeah.
You'd be able to click follow again, but.
And maybe we'll go back and make it so we have an unfollow button, but for now, you actually should do it both places. Because like I said, you can never trust the user. So just because the button doesn't exist doesn't mean they can't, in their JavaScript console, make an XML HTTP request and do it manually. So any things you prevent on the client, you also have to prevent on the server. Because you cannot trust the client to do the right thing.
Are you saying that there's untrustworthy people in the
That's
world?
right, that's what I'm saying. You cannot trust your users, ever. And that's not even saying they're necessarily bad actors, that's just saying you can't trust them. They made a mistake, okay? So, yeah.
Too complicated to change the button when you follow somebody?
We can change the button.
So it says you're following the person?
Yeah.
Definitely be one of the things you want to do.
How would we do that?
Well, you can either change it to unfollow, which would be an attach and unfollow function. That'd probably be easy.
I think I would,
It's a conditional.
exactly. And I'd probably add to my model, the data that I send this, is following. And then I'd have an else. And maybe in the if here, I'd put an unfollow button. Right? But I would have to add the is following to my data.
Yeah.
So I'll go to do that real quick. Is this it? No, it's login. There it is. So I'll just add it here. So how do I get that? That's wait, that's not my profile, is it? This is their profile.
Yeah.
I have to get my profile, which I can get.
So when you get their profile, is that a little profile of people that you're reading tweets on that's saved by you on your browser, or is this profile that's basically their profile from?
This is the profile of the current user I'm looking at.
Yeah, but is it the system profile, Twitter's system profile of them, or is it your little profile that you make temporarily while you're looking at their tweets?
It's this object. So it's a username, email.
It's being stored. Is this temporary, or is it?
No, this isn't the data store. We're storing it in the data store.
Okay, and the data store is on your browser, right?
No. The data store is on Google servers.
Okay, so that's like, we're modeling that's profile being stored by Twitter.
Yeah,
That's the model we're making.
yeah.
We're making a clone of Twitter. We don't actually have anything to do with Twitter
Yeah, so
ourselves.
that's why you're taking the is following out of it.
I'm adding as follows. I'm adding.
Well, I thought you were adding it to their profile, that won't work.
No. I added to their profile the following. So I have a list of the users they're following. And I'm adding to our data model is following so that I can show a follow or unfollow button. And so I want to set is following to true if they're already following that person, and false if they're not already following that person. And so what I had to do was get my profile for the current user, because the profile here is the profile of the person I'm looking at. And so I don't need their follow list, I need my follow list. And so that's why I had to get it up there. And then I'm going to loop through it. So I'm going to say if my profile is not nil, Because you can view this page if you're not logged in, so I may not have a profile, and that's okay, you're allowed to see the page. But I need to check that. And then I'll say my profile that following. And then I will say if f is equal to username, model dot is following the string. That make sense? So I look through my follow list. If the current username is in there, then I'm following that person. So is following is true. So we can improve this slightly by adding a method to profile. And then I will just copy this code into there.
That's cool.
But it's the same. It's the same code, right? It's just it just makes it easier over here because now I can say,
in the type model struct at the top there, you have is following, and that means that you're following that person, right? That
yes,
user.
the current person I'm looking at.
So that's just the current person you're looking at. That's what that structure is.
If I'm A, so I'm at A, and I'm looking at /B, so I'm looking at B. This is the page I'm on in a local host. If so I'm on this page, then this model is representing the data for this page. Okay, so I'm on this page, I see, at B, and then I see tweet, tweet, tweet. And what the is following is determining is whether or not this button should be follow or unfollow.
Where's it getting its information? From your following list? From the list of people you're following?
Yes,
Yeah.
I ask my profile if I'm following this username. And I store that in my model so that I can determine whether or not to show the follow.
Okay, that makes sense.
But actually there's an issue here in that we need an additional if. It's not enough for me to show follow, unfollow. If I'm not logged in, I shouldn't see a follow button at all, because if I'm not logged in, I can't follow a user. I can only follow a user if I'm already logged in. But like I said, you can view these sites without being logged in. So what we need to do is add can follow. And then
That's just asking whether you're logged in or not?
basically, that's basically the idea. And so now I have the can follow, and then in here I can say another if dot can follow. Does that make sense? And then just tab those in. Okay. So now I don't see any buttons if I can't follow. Okay. I only see buttons if I can follow. You're right, we could have it logged in and do it that way. Either way. We could add logged in here. Okay, so we added a button to here, follow, unfollow. Now I click follow. I think it probably worked because it changed to unfollow. So when I clicked follow, it caused a post to the server right here. Post API follow, and then a bunch of stuff. And we can see that if it did it or not by looking at localhost 8000. I'm looking in the data store viewer. And in here we can see that for this, I have a following example. So I clicked follow on the example, so it added it to the list. You can't edit a list in this editor, but you can see it at least. Okay, so that is an important point because a slice of string, a list of a value, you can have like a slice of int or a slice of whatever. You can store that in a data store. It's a different type. It's not like storing it as JSON or something. It really does know that it's a list. Okay. And one of the interesting things about a list is that I can use it as part of my query filters. And so when I use equal, when I say username equal, it's equal to any of the values inside the list. So we can use that to build our queries. So now I have follow, unfollow. So that was the first step. I needed to add the button on the user page, and it adds it to the profile, and so the data model has this information in it now. Now I need to use it to change two other things. So we have this tweets link up here. I think we also want a link that will show you who you're following, who this person is following, and show you who is following this person. Because you can see that on Twitter when you go to a user account. And so I want to add 2 additional links to this. Before I do that, we'll commit the changes. So added, follow, unfollow buttons. Push that up. And then restart the server.